Hey guys, thanks for joining me for Learn to Play Games. My name is Lance, and today we're going to take a look at Smog Riders Dimensions of Madness. This is a game by Scale 75 Games. It takes roughly an hour to an hour and a half to play, and it is a competitive game, so each player is going to be working against the other players to gain the most victory points to be the overall winner at the end of the game. So in the game itself, the players are going to be split into two separate groups, the attackers and a defender. From there, then the players are going to select which faction that they want to play, which there are two different factions. We have the Common Steam Alliance and the Abyssal Empire. Once the attacking players have chosen their alliance, then they're going to get three characters from that different faction each, and then the defender will take the other faction. And then from there, then the players are going to choose a scenario they want to play, and then depending upon that scenario, it'll tell you where to set up the attackers and the defender and all the different starting things in that. And then throughout the game, the defender is going to try to hold off the attackers and gain victory points by meeting certain criteria. And then the attackers, each one of the attackers is working independently, so they're not working together. Now, they can work together for a common goal, but in the end, it's only going to be one player that wins. So even if they're working together, ultimately there might be some backstabbing in there. Once the objectives have been claimed, they might fight each other and whatnot. So my opinions on this one, this is a really interesting one. I've really enjoyed a lot of Scale 75 stuff. They are known for their paints and their miniatures, and the miniatures in this game are really, really good. They used some of the miniatures that they have from their Smog Riders set and made a game out of it, basically. And it's a really interesting game. I would definitely recommend checking it out if you like competitive games, if you're really into backstabbing and going after other players and painting really cool models and all that kind of stuff. This is definitely one I would recommend checking out. It plays very smooth, and they have a number of scenarios in it as well that you'll be able to work your way through. Each one plays a little bit differently. So of course, these are just my opinions. I'd love to hear you guys in the comments below as well. Let me know if you guys have played this one. If this is one that's of interest to you. If you've used or played or collected any of Scale 75 stuff, let me know in those comments below what you guys are thinking on this one too. Now, of course, these are just my opinions. I'd love to hear you guys as well in the comments below. Is this one that you've played, or have you played anything else from Scale 75, backed any of their Kickstarters or whatnot? Let me know in those comments below what you guys think on this as well. If you enjoy this video, if you like what I do, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel, as it really does make a big difference and helps me to continue to grow and be able to bring these games to you guys. And if you want to stay up to date on all my videos, also consider ringing that bell so you get notifications anytime I release new content. So let's head to the table and I'll teach you guys how to play. There are 4 sets of standard 6-sided die included in the game, and there are going to be 4 different colors, and each color is going to represent a different type, which is magic, agility, strength, and generic. And I'm going to cover how these will work a little bit later in the video. There are also 3 different decks of cards included in Smog Riders. This first set are the magic cards for attackers, and these are going to have the purple background on the back of the card. This deck of cards is going to include a number of different cards, including reaction cards, item cards, and effect cards. And each of these cards is going to have the name at the top. With the reaction cards, they will have a picture of a shield, and they can be used during the defender's turn, where the rest of the cards must be played during the attacker's turn only. Then we'll have the image of the card and the effects of that reaction. With item cards, again, you're going to have the name at the top, a little gear in the corner, and then the image of the item, and any effects or spots for dice to be placed to activate those abilities on that card. And then finally, the effect card, again, will have the name at the top, an image, and then the effect that's resolved during the attacker's turn, and then discarded at the end of that turn. The second set of cards we have are the defense cards for the defending player, and these are going to have the blue background. And these cards, again, will vary, including all kinds of different effects and things that the defending player can use both on the attacker's turn and during his defense turn. Each of these cards, again, will have the name of the card at the top, an image of the card, and then the effect that is resolved when that card is played, and then it'll be discarded. And the final set of cards we have are room cards, which will have the brown background. Each time an attacking player moves one of his characters into a new room that has not been moved into by any attacking player, they're going to draw the top room card. Each of the room cards is going to have a name of the card at the top, and then the type of curse, which there are 3 different kinds of curses. We have alarm, vortex, and punishment. And each of these will have 1 or 2 or more dice and pictured on there. And anytime the attackers roll dice in that room, and they roll those symbols that match those, there's going to be a different effect that's going to be triggered. For example, with the alarm, whenever a die matches the number on any one of the numbers on the curse, the defending player gets to take a card. So anytime an attacker rolls a 6 or a 5 in that room, then the defending player gets to draw a card. And then underneath that is going to be the penalty. So if the room is still active at the end of the attacker's turn, then they have to suffer the penalty. And if they're able to solve the room, then they get to get the reward that's listed there. On the bottom of the card, there are going to be potential of 3 different icons. The first one are little allies that are rewarded if a player defeats a room or solves it. Then in the middle of the card is the number that needs to be solved in that room. So the attacking player will roll dice and add dice up until they get that number on that room to solve it. And then finally, if that room comes with any turrets, those will be shown on this side. And I'll go into more detail about this during the attacker's turn. Each of the character cards that is included in the game is double-sided, with one side being the attacker side and the other side being the defender. So let's go ahead and cover the attacker side first. So each card is going to have a name of that character at the top of the card. And then going on this side, we have the action dice that character will have during their turn. Then the image of the character, the number of health points they have, and mind points, and then the faction symbol that character is associated with. Then on the other side, we have the main attack for the attacker and what they need to roll to activate that attack, and then any bonuses they receive based on the color of the dice that they use to activate that ability. Then we have the secondary skill, which again will be activated by placing a die, 1 or more die on there, depending upon the special ability, and then a special skill that will be active based on whatever it is for that character. Then if we look on the opposite side for the defending player, with theirs, it works pretty much the same way, they just have a little bit different things on there. So again, the name of the character on the top, and their image, the faction that they're associated with, and then their health and mind points. And then this time they're going to have generic dice that they're going to throw. And then they'll simply have their main attack and the type of attack that it is and the amount of damage that it does based on the results that they have. For board setup, the first thing you're going to do is decide which scenario you want to play, and I'm going to go ahead and do a modified version of the first scenario just to show you guys how everything's set up. So you'll lay out the different board tiles, and then you're going to go ahead and place out the doors in all the different sections as listed on the board. So basically just in between each one of the different tiles to line them up. From here, then we're going to go ahead and set up the attacking player's characters. So each player of the attackers is going to choose 3 characters they want to play as, and this can be done in any manner that the players choose. So I've gone ahead and selected these already for the players. Each player is also going to receive 3 luck tokens, and you can just place these off to the side. They don't necessarily have to be next to each one of the characters. And then the other player will get their miniatures, and you can go ahead and place them in the starting spaces of the front of their tile that they've selected. And our other player over here, and then go and shuffle up and place out each one of the decks of cards. So the first one we have is the room deck, and go ahead and leave a space for the discards. Then we have the defense and the magic. You can also place out all the different dice you're going to be needing for the game. You can also place out all the tokens you're going to need, and for this video I'm going to go ahead and use Crystal Fortress's pod sets that they have, and I'll have a link down in the description below, but these are really nice trays for you guys to organize all your different tokens in. From there, then we're going to go ahead and set up the defensive player, so he'll receive all the cards from the other team. So we have all the Commonwealth cards. We can go ahead and place out his miniatures, and he can also receive all of the different turrets that he'll need, and these are double-sided, so one side will have the single turret and the other side will have the other 2 options. Now, one other important thing with the magic deck, you can go ahead and separate all the little ally cards that are with that, so the Octopi, Rafter, and Siba, and place them off to the side as well, because those will be rewards for solving some of the rooms. Finally, you're going to choose one of the attacking players to be the starting player, and you can do this any fashion you want. You can have them roll dice or whatever, so I'm going to go ahead and select this player over here to be the starting player for this game. Smog Riders is played over a set number of turns, which is defined by the scenario. During each turn, the attacking players will go first, then the defending player will go, and then finally you'll resolve a stygian reaction round. This will continue until one of the endgame conditions is met, and the player with the most victory points will be the overall winner based on the scenario you've chosen to play. At the beginning of each round, the attacking players will go first, starting with the attacking player that has a first player marker, and proceeding clockwise from there with each attacking player activating their characters in turn. During each attacker's activation, they're going to follow a set of 6 steps in order, which will be to draw a card from the magic deck, making moves, doing the Stygian dimension if there are any of their characters in there, rolling and assigning dice, taking actions, and then finally reanimation and recovery of mind and health points. And I'm going to take you through each one of these steps in order so you can see how they work in depth. So the first step in an attacker's turn is to draw a card from the magic deck. So we have Dodge, and this was a reaction card as it has a shield in the corner. So the players will just set that off to the side, and then we're ready to move on to the next phase, which is movement. During the movement step, each of the 3 characters that a attacking player controls will get 3 movement points which they can use to move around the board and do different things. So for each point of movement that the player spends, they can move to any adjacent space, which are any of the 8 spaces around a character. The only limitations are that they cannot move through a wall, a closed door, or enemy models. They can move through friendly models, they just cannot end their turn on the same space as a friendly model. Now, if a character is next to or adjacent to a door in one of the 3 spaces adjacent to a door, they can spend one of their movement points to open the door or close the door if it's already open. If a character is adjacent to another character, they can also spend a movement point to pass gear cards to the other character. And if there is gear on another square, a player can spend one of their movement points to gather all the objects of the same square, either as they pass through it or if they're adjacent to it. Another option our player has during the movement step is that he can enter the Stygian dimension. In order to do this, he has to do this as the first thing during his turn. He cannot choose to spend any of his movement points beforehand. And then if he wants to do this, then he's going to replace his miniature with his Stygian marker. And then he'll place that miniature in any one of the 6 gateway spaces, which are any of these spaces on the outer perimeter of the Stygian dimension. Now, he cannot place his miniature on a gateway space that is locked or occupied, and if all 6 of the spaces are occupied, then he can choose one of those spaces and move a mini in that space to the next available space along that track. Now, one other important thing over here in the real world with the Stygian markers is that any other model may move onto or through that marker. And if our character ever comes back to the real world and his marker is occupied, then he can simply place his miniature in one of the available adjacent hexes to that token. And then he'll remove the token as normal. The one other important note with this is that the players cannot open portals on the entrance or exit tiles to the Stygian dimension. And the other thing we need to cover with movement is when one of the attacking characters moves into a room for the first time that no other attacking characters moved into. So let's go ahead and say, for example, with our shark character here, we spend our first point of movement to open the door, and our second point of movement is to go into the room. So this is the first time any attacking player has moved into this room. So we're going to have to reveal the top door card from the door deck, and then from there, all the doors in the room are considered locked except for the door that our player entered, so that the other characters can come in there. And all these other doors are going to remain locked until this room is solved, and I'm going to go into more detail about that during that step. And then any character that has blue agility die listed on their action dice can choose to spend that agility die for 2 additional points of movement. And he can do this with each blue die that he has. So if our character would have other blue dice from other things, he can choose to spend those now instead of using them later on during his action phase. The third step in a player's turn is the Stygian dimension. And before moving into that, I want to cover the Stygian dimension real quick. So first off, it is made up of a number of different spaces. The first space you're going to notice are these colored spaces that we have around the board. These are considered the gateway spaces, and anytime a character moves into the Stygian dimension, they're going to start in one of these spaces that is not occupied by any other character. From there, then each one of the gateways is going to be connected by 2 different spaces which are considered passageway spaces. And then finally, the central space that is connecting all the other spaces is considered the eye. Then also around the board, we're going to have these little square spaces with numbers in them, and those are punishment spaces, which will be used later on, and I'm going to go into detail about those. Now, depending upon where your character is located, they will have certain actions that they can perform during their turn. So let's go ahead and say, for example, that we have our character in this space here. So first off, with the gateway spaces, the only action that character can perform is an astral travel. To do this, they're going to spend one of their action die, which each character is going to start with a pool of action die at the beginning of their turn. And they're going to be able to use these in the Stygian dimension to do different things. So in order to do an astral travel, the player is going to spend one of their action die to do that. And they're just going to place it off to the side, and that will let them move one space towards either the eye or back towards the gateway. Another action the player can perform is to provide backup to the real world. He can do this in any passageway space or from the eye. He cannot do this from the gateway. In order to do this, the character's token must be in a room that is adjacent to another room that the character wishes to provide backup to that is connected by a doorway. Now, backup can be provided to any room if the character is in the eye. To provide backup, the character is going to select one or more magic dice available from his action dice, and he's going to add them to the dice pool in the room. And when backup is given, that character cannot take any more actions in the Stygian dimension or return to the world plane. And then the last type of action a character can perform is to move back to the real world. In order to do this, he must be in the I space and then have a die that he can spend to return to the real world. And then he can place his character back anywhere in the real world except for a start or exit area. So let me take you through a couple of examples of this now. So let's go ahead and say that it is a new round for our characters or for our attacking player here. He's in a room that is activated, and so he is going to need some help in this room. And our character over here is too far away to assist him with that. So she's going to spend her turn to move into the Stygian dimension. And again, you have to do that at the beginning of your activation for that character, and they cannot do anything else before doing this. And they can't do this from a starting or exit location. So we're going to replace her character with a token, and then we're going to choose one of the gateway spaces in the Stygian dimension to place her. So we'll go here. Then during the Stygian dimensions step, she's going to go ahead and spend one of her dice, and that'll let her move one space towards the eye. From there, then she can wish to either spend the other die to move again, or she can try to support her fellow players. In order to do this, she's going to send a die or a purple magic die from her active or her dice pool to the characters that are in a room adjacent to hers. So her token is here, so a room that is adjacent to hers is this room that is connected by a doorway. So she'll simply add this to their dice pool when they create it. Now, as our character moves along, if she is in I space and she has a die left, she can choose to spend that to move to any location on the board except for a start or end location. So this is a great way to move around to the board very quickly. So for example, she can move into here and be ready to grab one of those victory point tokens to help her team win the game. And when she comes back onto the field, her walker token will be removed. The fourth step in a player's turn is rolling and assigning dice. And you're going to do this for each room in which you have an active character as part of that team. So for example, if our character was still in this room instead of being in Styx, she would have her own dice pool that is made up of any dice that she has not used yet. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. Our characters here, we have two of them in here, so we're going to create their dice pool. Now, in our previous example, we had our character up here in Styx assign a magic die to assist our characters, so this will be added to the pool, as well as both of the dice from each of the characters in that room. From there, then we will go ahead and roll those dice, and then we can assign them to our characters to do different actions. So any dice that match any of the numbers that are on a room card that is active are going to cause a curse or penalty to the characters. Now you can avoid this by spending a luck point for each of those die, or you can spend a luck point to re-roll those die as well. So for example, with ours, we have 3 dice that match those numbers. So let's go ahead and spend a luck point and re-roll those dice. All right, so that's a little better. From there, then we can spend those dice on various actions. So there are 3 different actions our characters can perform, which are solving a room, pressing an attack, and special actions. And I'm going to take you through each one of these. Now, the one other thing I want to cover real quick is with the active room cards. So with those, again, based on the color of the card is going to be what kind of curses are attached to that card. So for example, with this one, this is an alarm card, and so any of those dice that match that, for each one that matches, our defending player will get to draw a card. So in our previous example, if you remember, we had 2 dice that were 2s and 1 that was a 4. So in that situation, our player would have gotten to draw 3 defensive cards, and that's why we spent that luck token to re-roll those dice to try to get those off of there. On top of that, we also wanted to get a higher number on those dice to help us solve the room. Now, it could potentially take multiple turns to solve a room if the room allows it, and it'll say so on the card otherwise. Otherwise, you can assign any number of those dice to solving that room and getting that number. So, for example, with our dice here, we would have to assign pretty much all of these in order to solve that room. So we would have the 2 6s there for 12, and then these 2 would be 22, and any number over that is simply just wasted. But then we would solve that room and receive those cards, the rewards that are listed on that card. Now, if we didn't want to, or we only wanted to assign some of those dice to that room, we can also press an attack. So if we have an enemy in there, or a turret, or an ally that we wish to attack, we can do so by assigning dice to our different attacks on our characters that are in those rooms. So for example, with our cat here, we need to match on his attack card a number of dice that will give us a 7 or higher. And then he also has a special ability that if we spend 1 red die and 1 blue die, we also get a power steam point. So for example with this, if we wanted to activate this, we could spend a 5 and a 6, which would activate that special ability on the bottom. And it's also going to do 1 melee damage to an adjacent model. So if we had a turret in there, for example, and he was next to it, so let's go ahead and say that we had a turret here, he could do 1 damage to that turret and eliminate it from that room. Now, you can assign any number of these dice to any of our characters that match those symbols, and each of the characters is going to have different attack powers and different secondary powers that they can activate. And each one of those is outlined in the book, as there's a number of different ones that have different features on that, so you definitely want to be familiar with how those work based on the characters that you've selected. And the final thing is special actions, which there's a number of different ability cards and effect cards that are going to have their own type of actions that a character can perform. And again, you're going to spend any dice that you need to activate those abilities. So let me show you one more example of this. So in this situation, we have our characters kind of split up a little bit more. Again, our one character is up in sticks, and she is supporting our character in this room. So again, we're going to select which room we want to resolve first. So let's go ahead and take care of this one, as there aren't any enemies in this room. So we have our character up here, and so he can roll his dice and use them in any way he wants to. So he's got a 5 and a 4. And on his card, he does have a secondary skill that if he spends a 5 or more, he gets to heal 1 health. So if he had taken any damage, he could choose to assign a die there and do that. Or if an enemy was in that room with him, or an ally from another attacking team, he could also choose to attack them if he wanted to. Or if he had a ranged attack and he had line of sight to an enemy in a secondary or an adjacent room, he could also use that to attack them. Now, if he doesn't have anything to resolve in that room, then he simply is going to discard those dice. And then we move on to the next room, which again is this room. So we would use the die from our character that provided support, and any dice from our character that we have. So we would get his 2 die, and if he had any other cards that provided dice, we would also grab those. And again, we would give them a roll. If any of those dice match the symbols on the card, again, we're going to get cursed by those. So with this room, again, we would have our defending player draw 1 card from the pool since we have a 4. Now, there are other effects from different types of rooms. Some of them will take those dice and remove them from your pool and so on. From there, then we can use those dice to either solve the room or activate some of our abilities. So since we didn't roll very well, what we could do instead of trying to solve the room is we could spend these 3 dice here and activate his ability to take out this turret. We would need to have a 7 or more by placing those dice there, which we do. And if we had a red and a blue, we would gain a power point. So let's go ahead and grab that. And then we do 1 damage to the turret, which will eliminate that turret and provide us with whatever that turret is based on the type of turret it is. From there, when our players are all done, then it would move into the final step of their turn. From here, I want to go into a little bit more detail about combat and the 2 different types of combat, which are melee combat and ranged combat. So first off, with melee combat, it's very straightforward. You just simply have to have your character adjacent to your target that you wish to hit. From there, then you'll resolve your character's melee attack ability, and each attack is going to list whether it is a melee attack or a ranged attack. So with that, again, we would roll our dice from our active pool for that room, and then we can assign those dice to any one of our abilities that we want to, as long as it matches the results that we need. So for example, with our melee attack here, our character has a melee attack that needs a 7+, and we can use up to 4 dice to equal that. So in this example, we could use these 2 dice if we wanted to in order to activate that ability and deal 1 damage to the enemy that is adjacent to us, or in this case, the turret. Now we could use this 2 as well, and that way then we would use a blue and a red die and get that power token as well. In order to make a ranged attack with a character, again, first they have to have a ranged attack. So our character here, his second ability, or his secondary skill, is a ranged attack. In order to do that, first we have to determine the line of sight to a model that we wish to target. So in this example, we have an enemy here, and let's say that this was an ally that was another attacking player's character. In order to determine if we have line of sight, we're going to draw an imaginary line from the center of one of the sides of our character to the center of one of the other sides of an enemy. So for example, we would draw a straight line from here to here, or here, and as long as that line does not cross another model or a closed doorway, we have line of sight to that model. So we would have line of sight to this enemy here, and we would have line of sight to this guy here as we drew a line from this point to that point there. But if we drew a line from here, it would be blocked by this turret. But let's go ahead and say, for example, it was here, then this enemy would block us from being able to see this character. And it doesn't matter how many rooms it goes through, there is no range limit as long as you have an open doorway and a line of sight that is determined. From there, you're going to choose your targets. So again, we have this one here. And if we look at his attack here, this particular attack must be in sequence. So it has to be in sequential numbers. So 2, 3, 4, or 4, 5, 6, or any combination of those. So we just so happen to have rolled that, so we can use that as well. So we can go 2, 3, and 4. And then that one will do 1 damage to that target. Now we can also spend power or steam points to add additional points of damage with that as well if we had any. The last step in an attack player's turn is reanimation and health and mind point recovery. So during the game, as players do different things, they're going to take hit points and mind damage. So for example, with our shark player here, if he receives 4 or more hit points, it'll match his threshold of 4 points, and in which case then he will become incapacitated. We're going to remove his model from the field and place his incapacitated marker on it, which is the opposite side of the portal. Now during this phase, a character adjacent to a fallen character can automatically reanimate that teammate if there is no enemy in the same room. In order to do this, then he would remove a hit point from him and replace that token with that model. The other thing is that all characters in the real world can remove 1 madness point marker from their boards during this phase. So with our character here, he could remove 1 madness point, but our character over here is in Styx, so she cannot remove a madness point during this round. And if a character ever receives enough madness points to equal their madness value, they will become stunned and will place a stunned token on their character card. The other thing is if a character does nothing during its turn, it gets to remove 1 wound from its card as well. Now that our attacking player has completed all of his actions, we're ready to move on to the next attacking player in clockwise order, which happens to be our player over here. So to start his turn, we're going to draw a card from the magic deck for him. So he has found a stunner, and so he's going to choose one of his characters to give this to. So we're going to go ahead and give it to this character here, as he doesn't have any ranged attacks currently. From there, we're going to move on to the movement step. So we're going to go ahead and start with one of our characters, which will be the Jester. He's going to spend his first action to open the door, and second and third to move into the room. Now, since this is a brand new room, we're also going to reveal a room card, and so we have lethal defense here. So this is a punishment card, so each time one of our characters rolls a 6 in this room, he will deal 1 damage to one of the characters in that room. And this room also comes with a standardized turret, so we're going to add that to the room somewhere, the defender will, and you can place it on any of the walls except for a place that's going to be blocking a doorway. So he's going to stick it all the way over here. It'll go back to our characters now to move the rest, or the player to move the rest of his characters. So he's going to move 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. From here, we'll move into the Stygian dimension. And again, none of our characters could go into there because they started off in a start or exit space. And that is the first action they must do during their turn. So the next step is to go ahead and grab all of our dice and form a pool based on our characters in there. So all of our characters in there. So we're going to go ahead and roll all the dice. Oof, well, we got a couple of 6s, so we definitely don't want that. So let's go ahead and spend a luck gem to re-roll these 2, and we'll re-roll that 1. Well, I guess it's just the way it is. So for each one of the dice that matches the number on the card, our player is going to deal 1 damage to one of the characters on there. So the first one he'll go ahead and do is on this guy, and then we'll do 1 on the Jester as well. From there, we can assign the dice, so we have 12 points here to go ahead and work on that. And then let's go ahead and assign these 3 here So that'll give us our 22 points to solve that room. So as a reward, we get to draw 2 cards from the deck. So we have the Steam Justice, another gun. So we'll go ahead and give that to our Jester. And our second card here is Valuable Information. We gain 3 victory points. So we'll add those. So our victory point tokens, and then this will be discarded. And then we do have 1 die left, which isn't going to really help us too much right now. We don't have anything that we can use that on, so this one will simply be wasted. The last step in our turn is health and recovery, so we don't have any mind damage right now, and all of our characters have done something this round, so we won't be able to heal any wounds. So from here, then it's going to move on to the next attacker, which all of our attackers have gone, so we're ready to move into the defender's turn. So the first step in the defender's turn is to draw a defense card as well. So our defender has found Defense Reinforcement, and this one will let him, the selected room has an additional curse of Alarm 4, so he'll get to add an additional curse on top of whatever the room card is that comes up. From there, then we're going to consult the chart based on the number of players, and this will be our defender's reinforcement phase. So as you guys can see here, for a 3-player game, on turn 1, he gets to draw 1 additional card, and he gets a level 1 turret. So again, he'll draw another defense card. So he has Shock. All attackers in the room are stunned. So a nice card. And he gets to take a turret for level 1. From there, then he's going to deploy any reinforcements he gets immediately. So both turrets and any minions that he gathers. So he gets to choose where he wants to place these. So let's go ahead and make it harder on our first attacker, since our second group already has a turret in there as well. So we'll go ahead and put it over here. And again, it will go on one of the edges of a wall that isn't blocking a doorway. From there, then the rest of the defender's turn works pretty much the same way as all the attackers. He would move into the making a move step, where if he has any minions out there, each one of them would get 3 movement points that they can use to move around the board. Next, we would go to the Stygian dimension again. So if he had any minions, he could choose to teleport those into the Stygian dimension. Then we would move on to taking and assigning dice. So with that, we have 2 turrets, so we can do those. So let's go ahead and cover turrets. From there, then our defender will take and assign dice based on the room. So again, each room will generate its own dice pool based on the characters and turrets that are in there. So with our room over here, our turret will grant us 1 generic die. It can target any enemy model in there that it has line of sight to. So in this room, we can target this character, but not this one because he is blocking our space. So we're going to again give it a roll. And if it gets a 5 or 6, he does a wound. It does a 6, so our character over here, Cat, will take a wound. And then we'll do the same thing for our other room, and we'll go ahead and target that character there. And he got him too. So our turrets were very successful this round and had done 1 damage to each of our characters. From there, then, if he had any others, then he would resolve those, but he does not, so that will be the end of his turn. From there, we're ready to move into the final step of the round, which is the Stygian dimension phase. The Stygian reaction is broken into 2 different sections, Stygian Tide and Stygian Retaliation. So first off, with the Tide, it is a continued pulse that pushes all of the characters away from the eye. And so each character that is in the sticks is going to be pushed 1 space back towards a gateway. Now, a character can choose to suffer a mind point to resist this and stay in the space that they currently are in. Now, some of our characters, such as our character here, has a resistance to the Tide, so she will not be pushed back, but any normal character would be pushed back 1 space towards the gateway. And that's including the characters in the eye, so they would be pushed back, and when from the eye, they would choose a space to move into. Now, if a character is already in the gateway when the Tide goes off, it is going to be forced back into the real world and will replace its token in the real world. Again, they can spend a mind point to avoid this. And there are going to be certain effects of a card that will expel characters from sticks as well. These cannot be prevented or countered by giving up mind points. And then finally, if a character in sticks lose all of their mind points, they are immediately expelled to the real world again, and they will be stunned for their next turn as well. And then the second step in the Stygian reaction is the retaliation. So the Stygian dimension is a very dangerous place, and anytime a character spends dice to move around in there, those dice are going to be collected during this step, and all of them are going to be rolled. And then for each number that's rolled, it'll be placed on that spot on the board and is going to do 1 mind point of damage to each of the gateways that are in between it, as well as all of the passageways, the 2 passageways in between it. And then let's go ahead and say we rolled a couple more dice, and one of them, another one was a 6. Only one of each number counts, so you would not stack them where it would do multiple points of damage. And then this one would come over here. But let's go ahead and say, for example, that we had rolled a 1 as well. That would do 1 damage to each one of these spaces. So if our poor character had been here, she would have taken 2 points of mind damage, 1 from this side and 1 from this side here. But she got lucky, she was in between, so she doesn't take any damage there. The one exception to this is if a character is in the eye, it is not affected by any of the retaliation steps. Once you're done resolving all of that, then we're ready to move into the next round in the game, starting again with the attackers. Well, I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Or swing by my Facebook and Twitter accounts, let me know what you guys are playing or doing there. I'd love to start a conversation with you guys, or drop a comment down in the comment section below. As always, thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my videos and leaving me feedback on them. I do really appreciate it, and I do try to take into account everything you guys say to make the best possible videos. If you find these videos helpful, if you like what I do, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel, as it really does make a huge difference in creating these videos and helping to get new games from companies. So please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. If you found these videos helpful or if you enjoy it at all, please contribute and hit that button for me. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.